and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover additional customization options for the Cleric class that were introduced by Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I've stated this before, but as you know, D&D is a role-playing game, and the overall idea is that while you're playing your character, you are taking on their persona and more or less acting as they would. The customizations we'll be covering in this video allow you to enhance your playing experience for the Cleric class by giving you additional avenues to customize your character and provide more detail about them. D&D does this in a very prompt-friendly way by providing you some examples that you can make use of directly or use them creatively to come up with your own ideas. The clerical customizations include minor details of the temple where they took their training, some keepsakes picked up over their years at the temple, and some deep, dark secrets that run the risk of consuming their very souls. With the introduction of Xanathar's Guide to Everything, there are some new tables that provide these examples and potential points of inspiration that you can use to add these details to your character. Fantasy Grounds Unity provides a couple of ways in which you can access these new tables. The first, and by far the easiest, is to simply make use of the class's detail sheet that you see here and simply gain access to the links that open up the various tables in question. The second option is to make use of this sidebar Tables button, which is not necessarily always visible to someone who has literally just opened up Fantasy Grounds. Newly introduced changes that have been added to Fantasy Grounds Unity at the time of this recording also means activating this button is now different than it was before. Instead of clicking on this library button down here and gaining access to a series of buttons that used to be at the top here that allowed you to select all available options, whether you wanted to be the GM, whether you were playing, or whether you were creating a character, guess what? They're not there anymore, as you can see. You now have to go up to this Options button up here and click on the Sidebar button down at the bottom. That now prevents a toggleable list of all of the various buttons that you have, as well as the same buttons that used to be on the library window. And for the table, if you toggle it on and off, as you can see, it goes away and it returns. Once you have access to the tables button, clicking it opens up this window. You can then narrow the scope down to Xanathar's Guide to Everything as long as you have the player's module loaded, and you will have a listing of all of the tables that Xanathar's introduces. You still have to know the name for the class that you're looking for in the sense of what that particular class's sheet provides for table names, but you could do a quick search, and there you go. I personally believe it's still quicker to get at it through the class sheet. But let's go ahead and take a look at the first table here. And that is what temple your character is originated from. But it's not going to provide information on a specific name of a deity or the location of where the temple was specifically. That is still going to be up to you to provide, but it does give you some features about that temple that your character can then use in social situations. For example, the first item in the table listing gives a basic description of the temple itself, but nothing in overall detail. The idea here is that you would take this example, if you so chose it, and expand on it to craft your own story around it, and then add it to the notes section of your character sheet, which is right here, down here at the bottom. The amount of detail you go into is going to be entirely up to you, but the more detail that you put in, the more information you'll have for those potential social encounters that you might run into, or that you could get placed into by the DM, and be able to make use of that information and reference it. It also gives information to the Dungeon Master that they might be able to wrap a little short quest around it. Now, for all intents and purposes, to make use of this particular table, there are a couple of options that you have. You can simply just pick up an item and drop it into place. For example, I'll just drop it into the chat so that you can see what it does, which is already there. Or you can roll on it and then choose the random and build your story off of that. And then just simply drag and drop that into your note section. The third option is to read through each of these and see if it triggers something out of your own creativity and your own level of inspiration there. And then you add that to the note section in as much detail as you want. And that's generally how these tables are meant to be used, is really they're examples that you can directly make use of, or they're examples that you can use for inspiration to craft your own. The second table covers your cleric's keepsakes, or something that reminds them of why they entered into the clerical career, if you will, or more or less to keep them on the path that they have chosen. There are many reasons to have a keepsake. Really, the reason is entirely up to you. But this table provides several examples that you can choose from, roll against, or simply use to inspire your own idea or two, and you don't necessarily have to have just one keepsake. But if you do choose to take a keepsake, it is best to add it to your inventory as an item. So, for example, let's say this finger bone of a saint. When you drop it into place, it'll create an empty item and give it a little bit of a weight just so that it has some contribution towards your overall character's encumbrance. But the other thing it does is it doesn't really have much in the way of detail. So you're going to want to make sure that no matter which method you select to add a new item to this, unlock it, put in some of this information, specifically the description, which is what this last table or empty field is, and put in the details as to what this finger bone represents, why your character has it, who it came from, what the saint was, what significance it was for the particular temple that your character attended, etc., or whether it was even associated with that. Could have been due to a village that is where the saint lived, and that's where the finger came from. Things like that. It's really entirely up to you. But the more detail that you put in here, the more you're going to provide the dungeon master for potential information on being able to craft a story around it. One of the other reasons you want to do this is because you're now creating a tangible item to your character, which means it can potentially get stolen, lost, or your character's forced to give it up for some reason. Creating several role playing options that the DM can make use of in order to introduce some personal aspects of that object into their existing campaign that would link your character into that campaign in some way, making it a little bit more personal to you and potentially more enjoyable. And the last table is around the dark or deep secrets that your character is carrying with them, and they look more along the lines of flaws in relation to your character's personality, but there are some subtle differences. Now, for example, this first one, the imp offers you counsel. You try to ignore the creature, but sometimes its advice is helpful. Well, depending on the deity you have selected, it might be completely against policy for your character to be listening to an imp, or against canon of your particular religious order for that character. So that would be a very deep secret that your character is going to want to keep. And if it ever gets discovered, there might be a bit of a social judgment that comes into play, if you will, around the rest of the party towards your character that could add a little bit of flair to an overall social encounter between that party. But once again, these examples can either be used directly, rolled against, or used to come up with your own concept or idea that you can then flesh out and add the details to. This is another area that you would want to go through and add in as much information as you can or are comfortable willing to do, because it also gives another area where the dungeon master can interact with that information and create something to link in an overall social interaction or quest, or maybe tie it directly into the existing campaign in some way, shape, or form. Again, linking that overall campaign into your character's past a little bit, making it a little bit more personal to you as a player. There really are two locations that make sense to store this information in. The first would be down here in the notes section in this last part of your character sheet, or it could potentially be tied into your flaws section, because when you think about it, a secret really links towards a flaw and it might define that flaw. So it might make sense to stick it there, but it's entirely up to you. And that's even if you decide to go with this route. I love that Xanathar has once again added additional customizations, in this case for the Cleric class, so that anyone who has chosen a Cleric can add a little bit more information around that character's background and some of their flaws, information around some items that they have, things like that. Because you're now providing a dungeon master elements that they can pick and choose ideas from, if you will, to come up with new stories around those items that might tie your character into their overall campaign that they're running through, thereby linking that storyline through your character to you and hopefully making it a little bit more enjoyable for you. I'm not sure about other dungeon masters, but I know that when I've linked a little bit of a character's background into the overall story that I'm running them through, the players have enjoyed that a lot better because now it's become a little bit more personal for them. and they're a little bit more invested into the overall campaign as a result. But that does bring us to the end of this particular video, and I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.